Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Manuela Cirilli. I'm a Deputy Group Leader of Sales and Knowledge Transfer Group, and I'll be the host for today's joint EP Detector and Knowledge Transfer Seminar. I'll do just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we start. The seminar is being recorded, as you've seen from the message. We'll take your questions at the end of Maurizio's talk. Please keep your mics muted whenever not speaking, and the slides are already available on the Indico page. And it's a great pleasure to welcome our speaker, Dr. Maurizio Conti from Siemens. He will cover the state-of-the-art of positron emission tomography, technology and current challenges. We've actually been trying to get Maurizio to come to CERN in person for quite some time prior to the pandemic, and now, thanks to Zoom meetings everywhere, we managed to organize this quite swiftly, but we hope we'll still be able to welcome him again to CERN. I say again because Maurizio is no stranger to the lab. As a physicist, he spent time in Pisa, Rome, and CERN as a fellow with Italian National Institutes for Nuclear Physics, INFN, and was also a visiting scholar at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory in California. Maurizio joined CTI Siemens in 2000 as a scientist in the physics and reconstruction team in Knoxville in the US. And since 2016, he's leading the physics research team at Siemens Molecular Imaging as director of PET physics and reconstruction. He's an expert in PET, combined PET-CT, time-of-flight PET, and many other topics on which, as you might know, he also had some R&D activities here at CERN, notably in the crystal clear collaboration in the framework of our knowledge transfer activities. So we are sure that this seminar will be very relevant to many of you. And that's it for my quick introduction. Without further ado, I leave the floor to Maurizio for his talk this afternoon.
Grazie, Manuela. Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Okay, great, thank you. So just let's say that I'm honored to be invited by Knowledge Transfer Experimental Physics to give this talk. I'm pleased because this is home, going home after so many years. And I'm disappointed because I'm not there, right? But we'll do it in person some other time. So a few words about myself. Visual presentation of my career. I was born in Italy in a small city called Ancona on the Adriatic Sea. Some of you may have passed by it. I studied in Pisa. I studied physics in Pisa. And at that time, I studied already visiting CERN and other international labs. I spent a couple of years in California and at the Lawrence Berkeley lab. I spent 10 years as researcher at University of Naples under the beautiful Vesuvius in Italy. And then from the year 2000, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, working for CTI first, and then that boy became Siemens. Where is Tennessee? Let me show it in the map. It's right here. And let me zoom in. Knoxville is on the east coast of Tennessee, and Tennessee is famous for music, for Tennessee whiskey, Jack Daniels, and for PET scanners, because in fact, Siemens, located in Knoxville, Tennessee, is one of the major producer of PET scanners in the world. So it's very likely that somebody's having a PET scan. There's a high probability that it's actually something designed and manufactured in Knoxville. I'm going to go through different topics. Since I really don't know the audience, and I had to assume that there are people who are very, very familiar with positron emission tomography, people who are completely out of this technology. So I'll go through a quick information on what is positron emission tomography from the physics point of view. I'll talk about time-of-flight PET, which is the PET of the last 10 years at least, and why change the panorama of PET. I'll talk about the evolution of the technology and what is the state of the art today. I talk about two hot topics of the last 2-3 years, which is long axial field of view PET or total body PET, and the role of AI or deep learning, which is hot topic in any field today. And a few final remarks. I work for Siemens, and I thought that it would be good to give a industrial perspective. So in my review, it may look like there is a lot of Siemens and there is not enough credit given to other industry or other academic sites. It's on purpose. I acknowledge there is a lot of work going on. Siemens doesn't do everything, but I thought to present what we are doing as a way to bring my perspective, the direct work that we are doing. PET, Positron Emission Tomography, is based on the detection of the two annihilation photons generated at the annihilation of a positron and an electron. The positron is results of the beta decay. And essentially, we have a radioisotope that emits positrons. We tie it to a molecule that is injected into the patient, and we detect the two 511 in opposition. There is a lot of approximation here. They are not exactly 180 degrees. The position of the annihilation is not exactly the position where the molecule was deposited, but we also talk about that later. Bottom line is a very simple problem. If you want, you have two photons that determine a line of response, and in that line of response, you have your annihilation and your tracer. The tracer is a molecule that is labeled with a positron emitter radioisotopes. The most common is F18, and the most common tracer is a sugar. It's the FDG sugar. This is a table that shows a few years ago what was the number of total scans for each tracer. More than 90% is FDG, and more than 90% of scans, PET scans, are used for cancer imaging of cancer. The cancer is avid of sugar, and so we're going to see the sugar that goes into the cancer area. There are other tracers that don't use F18. They use gallium-68, they use carbon-11, and many others. And there are other tracers that are not for cancer detection, like rubidium is a radioisotope that is used for cardiac imaging. But let me say that today is 90% is cancer imaging with F18, with FDG. The basic detector, this is an old slides of probably 20 years ago, but still the basic has not changed. The detector is made of crystals. They are small in size, about the base is about a few millimeters, and thick, 20-30 centimeters in length to accommodate for efficiency of the detector. And what happens is that the 511 releases, creates a scintillation light. The optical ultraviolet photons is detected by a photo detector, which is, in this example, a PMT, now is silicon PMs. And what we do is that we measure the center of gravity of light, and we measure the position of the interaction based on center of gravity. It's very simple logic, it still works. The next step is to qualify the events by energy and time. So we take only events that have energy deposited of that correlate with 511 photons, and also we take the two events that are in time coincidence, right? And where the time window is of the order 3, 4, 5, 6 nanoseconds, and we'll talk more about that later. Once we qualify and we accept events because they match all the characteristics, we store them. And there are several ways to store data, list mode, sinograms, histoimages, but sinogram is the traditional and most common. And What is a sinogram? It's if I have a source of 2511 and 2 detectors fired, I have a line of response, and I measure the angle of that line based on a reference, 0 angle, in this case the vertical, and the radial position relative to the center of the scanner, for example. And then I place this in this sinogram that is based on radial and angular offset. Okay, I keep acquiring data, I pile them up until I build a whole sinogram, and all the data are stored in this array. Next step is to reconstruct from that array. Well, reconstruction ultimately are very complex, but bottom line is just the basic element is a back projection or a reprojection of the data. And if I have this example, each figure represent a view. This is a 0 angle. This is a 45, 90-degree angle. I back project all the event measured in my image space, and I have different partial images, and then I assemble them and I see the distribution, roughly speaking. More complex algorithm can bring you an actual image, right, in which could be iterative, could be analytical, and so on. But basically, we just try to locate in space the events that we recorded on the sinogram. The data needs to be corrected. Okay, it needs to be corrected for several factors. First of all, we have what is called normalization array. That is a calibration of the single detectors. They are all answering different. You know very well. In any physics experiment, we have this problem of the calibration. The normalization array calibrates the response of all the detector. And the other second correction, basic correction of the attenuation, the number of photons detected do not correspond to the original number emitted, but because they are absorbed or scattered in the path, and we do an attenuation correction that it's the normalization is essentially measured, and the attenuation correction is measured using transmission sources, CT, MR, and now other alternative techniques. Other correction we need to apply are the randoms and the scatter correction. In this graphic visualization, you see that in the central drawing, for example, if I have a high count rate, I detect in the same time window, 2 photons that do not belong, in this case, to the same event, right? And if I pair them with a green line, obviously I made a mistake. I placed the event in the wrong place. This coincidence are called random coincidence, and it can be measured or estimated and subtracted. Analogously for the scatter correction, if one of the 2 511 is scattered, then the position, the direction that it was carrying with it is not the correct anymore. And when I draw the green line, I incorrectly assign the direction of the original pair. Again, the scatter correction can be estimated and subtracted or corrected for. So this slide just show you also how we do the scatter correction. The scatter correction uses 2 information: the data that we collect in the sinogram, and some information on the attenuation map, on the anatomy, essentially. And so bottom line, after we acquire all the correction, we have a normalization array, a randoms array, a scatter correction array, an attenuation array, and this is all we need together with the emission to do a reconstruction. How does this thing work? This is a nice visual explanation. You have on the left the emission sinogram or emission original data that have been subtracted for randoms. I multiply by the calibration, the normalization, and I get a corrected sinogram. If I reconstruct this, this is a classical phantom with hot and cold sphere. You see that on the right, there is a hot rim, and this is because there is no attenuation correction. So the activity on the outside is more visible than activity inside. Well, I can take the data partially corrected. I multiply for an attenuation correction array, and I get a better scanner with better corrections. And I do reconstruct it. I more or less get what I expect it to be, but I haven't subtracted the scatter. And if I subtract the scatter, then I have a fully corrected image, and this is what we want to obtain. A lot of our work in this physics work is to get all the correction right. Let me move to a second chapter, which is time of flight PET. Up to now, and what I've been talking to now, I just talk about a coincidence window, right? Anything which is in that windows of 5 nanoseconds, for example, is considered coincidence. If we have a good time resolution, we can improve, use an additional information. And this is a visual representation. On the left, you can see that if my source was not in the center, but at X centimeters from the center in this hot blob, obviously one photon will get to the crystal faster than the other, right? So T2 minus T1 will be correlated to the position X. If I have perfect time resolution, I would know exactly where to place the source of annihilation, but we have a problem of time resolution that is not absolutely perfect. But we have been improving a lot in the past 10 years. And so what we do now is that we replace a conventional line of response, that an undetermined line response that tells me the source was anywhere in this line, into segment. And I place an annihilation in the segment that has that corresponds to the time of flight difference, right? So if the time of flight is close to 0, it goes here. If it's close to the segment 1, we go on -1 or +1. This is improves greatly the noise performance of the image. I will not go through the theory, but I'll just get to the summary of it. So it has been demonstrated via theoretical demonstration and experimental measurement that time of flight resolution implies noise reduction that could be quantified, and noise reduction is equivalent to a sensitivity amplification. So we can create an image which is equivalent to an image that has more counts because it has less noise. The theory says that the gain in signal to noise, if I apply time of flight reconstruction, is proportional to the square root of d, the diameter of the object or the sides of the patients, divided the time resolution of the scanner. In terms of counts equivalent, it's proportional to d divided by delta t. What that means, with some example, if I have a time of flight scanner with a time resolution of 200 picosecond, this is equivalent to an uncertainty or a segment length, if you want, of 3 centimeters, which is a factor 13 of gain for an average size patient, or 40 centimeters, or a reduction of noise of a factor 5. On the right here, you can see a plot of a few years ago. We put together some data of different experiments, and lined up demonstrated that the gain is really proportional to the square root of d over delta t. In terms of image quality, what this translates into a clear advantage in terms of images getting sharper and contrast becoming higher and noise becoming lower. This is an example of an old scanner with 550 picosecond. You can see the difference already in this hot spot. That is visually much more visible in today's scanners like a Vision. The 200 picosecond scanner will have much better results. So what we can do, we can have better images. We can reduce the acquisition time. We can reduce the dose, and we can make the patient more comfortable doing that. another old paper that I want to show because it was really a nice demonstration in the scatter plot of the gain correlated to BMI, so the body mass index of the patient. So a larger patient has a higher noise reduction, higher time of flight gain, as you can see. There are other advantages that are less intuitive, but if you work in the field, you find out that it's very strong advantages, that the time of flight reconstruction is more sensitive, it's more insensitive to inconsistent or incorrect data. So there is noise in the data, there is inaccurate normalization, inaccurate scatter correction, inaccurate attenuation correction. All this thing can be, how to say, made more less important. Their effect can be reduced by time of flight reconstruction. Here I have a nice example with a phantom. This is a phantom. It's a big cylinder with hot and cold spots. And this is a non-time of flight reconstruction from left to right. It's an iterative reconstruction method, and the 5 iteration is the one to the right. You see that there are 2 artifacts here created on purpose. You see these patterns in the background are due to inaccurate normalization. Normalization was not correct for this scan. And you see this hot spot on the, I hope you can see my mouse, the hot spot that is on the top of the phantom. There was a bubble here, an air bubble, and the attenuation correction did not account for that air bubble. But if I turn on the time of flight reconstruction on this case, you see that, look at the 5th iteration further on the right, the pattern, the pattern of normalization, inaccurate normalization has disappeared or greatly reduced, and the bubble of air on top of the phantom has appeared as a cold spot, not a hot, bright white spot. So the time of flight has filtered out inaccurate information from the reconstruction. The more we go into that improved time resolution, they also get more reproducible or more reliable information. Here I have a simulation of a phantom, and I want to measure the contrast recovery, the ratio of the activity in the sphere in the background is known. I have a contrast recovery plotted on the left. And if I repeat the experiment 10 times, 10 measurements, I get 10 curves, they overlap. It's a contrast recovery versus iteration number or noise. You know, going from left to right, I get more converged value, right? And the black line is the average. In this case, you know, the measurements are very close to each other, and they're very close to the average, or to the mean of the curves. But I reduced the counts to 1 million counts per data set, okay? And now, because of algorithm bias and noise, I see that the curves, they differentiate a lot, right? And they can be very far away from the mean. That means that if I only perform one measurement on a patient, and that's usually what I do, I'm not sure that I can get a reliable assessment on the activity concentration in that patient. If I go even lower, the curves go crazy completely, right? So there is a range of reliability for the PET measurements. It's not a linear system as you would like. But if I improve time of flight, I have a better behavior. In this curve, I have the same constant recovery versus the inverse of the counts. So on the right side, I have very low counts. So as you see, high counts, all the curves overlap. It's nice and flat. And then I start having these bands. Here in the bands, I represent that variability of the 10 curves, right? This is essentially the range of the measurement. If I have the light pink represents a 600 picosecond time of flight. You see that there is a very broad range here. 400 is the light red, and 200 picosecond is the dark red. With improving time of flight resolution, I improve the reliability of the measurement, and I make it more robust at low counts. This is an enabler for a lot of new science and clinical application that they are coming out now, and they've been enabled by the first time-of-flight scanners and by particularly the new generation of time-of-flight scanners. I mean, theranostic is the word that means therapy and diagnostic in the same, with the same molecule, essentially using an agent that is specific, a molecule that is specific to a target on a body, like a specific molecule, and I can label that compound with an imaging agent, with a positron emission radioisotope, for example, and a therapeutic agent that could be either a alpha emitter particle or beta minus emitter particle for radiotherapy, or an actual drug. But I can image the patient, and then I can apply the therapy, and I can know in advance what the therapeutic agent is going to be. And I'll talk about a couple of applications: small compound imaging, monoclonal antibody imaging, and also two categories. They don't really fit, they're not included in theranostics, yttrium-90 imaging and hadron therapy, but they belong to the same family because we are somehow using the same method to image and apply therapy to the patient, right? So I'll go through these examples, and all these examples are really made more possible or really enabled by good high sensitivity, high resolution scanners, high time resolution scanners. Yttrium-90 is used for a therapy of liver cancer. Essentially, some microspheres embedded with yttrium-90 are injected in the liver and near the cancer location, and there they act as they attack the cancer, right? They damage the cells that have cancer. Yttrium-90 decays more than 99% into the therapeutic beta minus, but also there is a small branch, a few parts per million, that emits a pair, positron and electron pair. That is a PET signal, very weak signal, a lot of very few counts, a lot of random fraction, and a lot of Bremsstrahlung from the therapeutic side. Difficult imaging, but I think the first article on yttrium-90 imaging and moral signal therapy on a PET scanner came out just a year after the first time-of-flight scanner came up. It was produced by Philips, and and they immediately was applied for yttrium-90, and it created enabled this imaging to happen. What is the difference? This is a visual on the left, a non-time-of-flight, on the right, a time-of-flight. Essentially, there is the non-time-of-flight image is dramatically noisy, and that implies where the position was near this lobe. The sigma is not uniform, and this does not correspond to the fact.
Hello?
And then there is a lot of noise where you're not supposed to.
Hallo, ist Alfons Weber hier. Das ist das Telefon von der Frau Verbrücken. Das hat die in meiner Wohnung gelassen.
Hello?
I think I'll mute him, and we try and move forward. Because he was speaking in German, I'll try to message him.
That's fine.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure, I'll go ahead. So another similar application is in hadron therapy. Hadron therapy is characterized by activation that can create carbon-11 or oxygen 15 inside the activated by the treated part. And then if the patient is quickly moved on a PET-CT or image on online with a PET, you can see the activation, and you can see where the dose was deposited. Okay, and this is from Heidelberg. It's an old picture from the group in Heidelberg where they had a nice example of this work. In about 10 minutes, I think they could move the patient from treatment to imaging. Problem is very similar, very low counts and very high random fraction, difficult imaging, but time of flight PET allows it. And this is on the left and the right, a comparison between non-time of flight and time of flight. So let me move to the another part, that it's theranostics for small compounds. A good example is PSMA imaging. PSMA is a molecule that is associated with prostate cancer, and in case of prostate cancer, we can use a PSMA-based compound, and in this case attached to a DOTA group, which is this representation here, and the DOTA can host inside itself a heavy metal. It could be either a gallium for imaging or lutetium for therapy, right? And then you know that whatever you see on the imaging will correspond to what will happen on the therapy when the day after or a week after the patient undergoes therapy with the same compound. Another interesting application is in monoclonal antibodies. Monoclonal antibodies are very hot now. They're used for cancer, but not only for cancer, for a lot of diseases. If you live in the US and watch TV, you got advertised for a new monoclonal antibodies drug every 5 minutes, and they're very specific because they target a specific cell surface marker, right? And you can attach to an antibody a PET tracer or a drug. And the same concept, you can use the same antibody and you can study if the drug will work based on what you see in the imaging. The antibodies are pretty big molecules. That means it takes a long time to be assimilated by the body. So the peak happens at 50, 100 hours. So you need a PET tracer that is a long half-life. Even though there are engineered antibodies, they are smaller and they could act faster. Monoclonal antibodies, clinical study up to a few years ago, as you see, they are growing dramatically. And monoclonal antibodies create some challenges for PET, because often these long life tracers, radioisotopes, are not pure beta-decay, so they have a lot of what we call prom gammas that makes the correction complicated. They are not 180 degrees with each other. They may have long positron range, so there is a blurring on the range, or a distance, spatial distance between where the annihilation happened and when the tracer was. There are less counts because often they have a poor branching ratio for PET. So on the left, pure beta emitters, on the right, prom gamma emitters. You see that the energy Emax is typically higher, and the half-life is longer. So. A nice example of how complicated it gets for us. This is a classic F18 decay scheme. It makes our life very easy made it very easy for many years. And this is a yttrium-86 simplified decay scheme, okay, in which only 30% is really PET signal. The rest is a variety of many gamma of different energies, and some of them end up into energy window that we use. I'll move now into what I call the evolution of PET and state-of-the-art PET, and I'll do it through the history of the Siemens PET CT scanner. But I would say that the research academic projects and the other industries are more or less follow the same time pattern and the technology pattern, so that whatever I present for us, it's valid for the field in general.
Maurizio,
yes.
You have about 15 minutes left, more
okay.
or less.
Okay. Now, time resolution. This is the 4 big releases of Siemens scanners of the past years. A scintillator LSO, introduction of the LSO was the enabler for the first true point scanner around the year 2000. The time resolution here is really 4,000 or 6,000 nanoseconds. There was no time of flight. It's the time window. The MCT around the year 2010 was a time-of-flight scanner, so the driver in the technology change was software, reconstruction, and electronics to make it to reach 500 picosecond time resolution. The vision here, the big change was the photosensor, silicon PM instead of PMTs. In the Quadra, is the same technology as the vision. There is more volume of it, and there is more problem of data handling. So that's the technology changes out there. All this is just a summary of what the vision is, but I'll just move quickly through how the detector is assembled. There are crystals about 3 millimeters and 20 millimeters long, assembled in mini blocks of 5 by 5, coupled with silicon PMs to match them and assemble in larger units. Okay, this is the basic block, and the scanner covers 26 centimeter axially with this block. The key elements for the good timing and the electronics are the fact that there is a common cathode readout for the timing and a leading edge discriminator, and then the single silicon PM are read individually for position and energy. Okay, so we separate the timing from the energy and the position. The performance that was presented in 2018 at the conference by the first hospital that received it, the group by Joel Karp at University of Pennsylvania. I just extracted from their presentation this plot that I like. This is a characteristic of time resolution as a function of the activity. At high count rate in the past, resolution would degrade. With silicon PM and with our technology and electronics, it's very, very stable. It goes from 210 in the oncology range to 215 at the end of the range in terms of count rate. So this is a really great characteristic of the new silicon PM scanners. Let me skip on this and move into the last 2 topics. The last 2 topics that I want to touch are hot topics of the day, of the last 2-3 years, the long axis field of view scanners, so total body scanners, and the role of AI. This is the Vision Quadra. The Vision Quadra is characterized by 106 axial length that allows for multi-organ coverage, about 225 time resolution, and a lot of crystals, gives you high sensitivity, and small crystal size that gives you a high spatial resolution. It's essentially made of the basic element of the vision in just 4 times more and assembled in a very compact way. If we want to do a look at the Quadra in terms of evolution, axial length was essentially stable for several years, and then we jumped into the Quadra to 100, more than 100 centimeters, because it was clear that there was an interest and an application for the scanners. And the first scanner was, the first scanner, long axis fluid scanner, total body scanner, is that one introduced by the Explorer consortium that as UC Davis, United Imaging, University of Pennsylvania, and other partners, and that built a couple of scanners, a 2-meter long scanner and 70 and then 140 centimeter scanner at University of Pennsylvania. So we realized that there was interest and use for this, and we built the Quadra. The sensitivity, NEMA sensitivity is a standard sensitivity measurement, and there's a standard among the industries, and here there is evolution of the Quadra of the Siemens scanners in terms of traditional sensitivity, which is the blue. It's a log scale, so be aware that we're jumping with factor 10, and the orange is the sensitivity that has been multiplied by a time of flight gain, which is a standard that is done now in the industry, and it accounts for a noise reduction due to time of flight. So you see the dramatic increment. The Quadra has two variations because there are two software implementation. One of them accepts more line response and therefore has a higher sensitivity. Present today's clinical application, I sort of divide in terms of application between present and future. The present is what can we do today in today's clinic with this Quadra or Explorer or long axial field of view scanner. We can make scanner faster. That applies more comfort for the patients and less motion artifact because the patient can stay still for 1-2 minutes, not for 10. We can have lower dose, repeated scans, pediatric PET, but also we can enable different new application. And I have them divided in two classes: high sensitivity, application that benefit from high sensitivity. And here I have just 4 examples. Breath hold PET CT. CT is already done in breath hold. The patient holds the breath in a few seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, does the scan, CT scan. With this high sensitivity scanner, we can do the PET in a similar way, and that makes it really very comfortable and movement free. Immunopet, we talked about that, very low counts. We can do it with high sensitivity. Pediatric imaging, we want to do very low dose for children. And PET CT screening of any kind for patient at risk. If we can reduce the dose, then we can give it to a healthy population or a population at risk. The multi-organ coverage allows to do other things like parametric imaging, single organ studies, kinetics, and interaction between organs, brain guts for Parkinson, brain spine for drug development. So these are very interesting new things that all the long axial field of view scanners are investigating now. 5 minutes on the role of AI. I wanted to cover that because it's AI is everywhere now. I'm also in the PET field. Often is maybe there's too much of it, but I do believe strongly there is a role for this, and we did start a heavy work on AI at Siemens 2 years ago. I think that now I'm very proud of the accomplishment we have received, published and unpublished work. And yes, AI or deep learning cannot solve everything, but there are several fields in which it can help us. And I'm going through some examples. Oh, here's a visual of how much the publications on AI in PET have been growing in the past years. I like to divide them in 3 classes. One is what deep learning can do for detector and system level. And then there is reconstruction and power reconstruction. In the detector system level, I see a couple of big blobs for improvement here. First, the detector performance. We can use AI, a trained network, to better understand the position of the interaction in the detector in terms of depth of interaction, intercrystal scatter, or the timing, improve the timing of the system. Also, we can use it simply to speed up calibrations, normalization techniques that requires a lot of time sometimes, but AI can make it faster. In reconstruction, there is what they call direct reconstruction. A deep learning method jumps directly from the raw data to the image. I have my doubts about it. It does work. It tries to emulate a conventional reconstruction, right? So, but it's hard to get better at a conventional since you are training the network with the same data with conventional reconstruction. But there is a lot of interest, and we are doing a lot of work there too. We can simply aid and speed up the reconstruction or embed AI in the reconstruction. We can work on low counts reconstruction that is also denoise during the reconstruction, and we can help a lot in correction. Attenuation correction can benefit greatly from artificial intelligence, scatter normalization, everything. Post-reconstruction is the part I work less, my group doesn't work much with it. It's the part that happens after the image has been created, radiomics, and there is a lot of interest. Actually, this part is probably the biggest part, but it's outside of the instrumentation field where I work. And I have here a few examples of some of those blobs. This is denoising a low counts, an example from Stanford University, in which they use deep learning to obtain to get a decent image for a very low dose scan. And here from Singapore, from a group in Singapore that did some work aimed towards PET-CT screening, for lung PET-CT screening, a very low dose, denoising of very low dose images. Other topic is attenuation correction. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a direct reconstruction, and there is direct or mixed or train network conventional method. This is a very nice work by Andrew Reeder's group in London. And here is from left to right, different reconstruction method. Focus on the third image is the conventional OSCM reconstruction. You just see kind of noisy. You move to the 3 or 4 to the right, and you have a very clear, smooth and sharp image. And this is a combination of conventional anatomical prior map reconstruction with AI. Okay, so get the best of both. We do some work in direct reconstruction at CIMET. Is a very nice article that we presented, and it starts from histo images and jumps directly in reconstructed images. We have been having very good results. Corrections. I recommend to read this review by Jae-Sang Lee from a group in Seoul, and that reviews all the method to obtain AI-based attenuation correction. And there are areas in which definitely the attenuation, conventional attenuation correction is very poor, particularly in MR, PET-MR, and this method greatly improved them. And this is an example from another group in medicine. You can see the non-corrected image on the left, the PET image. On the right is the CT. In the center is the pseudo CT, the deep learning CT, and it's getting very close to the actual CT, but we don't measure it. So this is really excellent results. Detector. How do we improve detector? There is a lot of work. This is a group in Munich and CERN too, and this is about depth of interaction from left to right, conventional method and CNN or neural networks method. You see that the spatial distribution gets sharper. We get the better, a more accurate information about where the events happen in the detector. Same thing for time resolution. You see Davis' paper. Again, using a CNN, I get a sharper time distribution. And I'm getting to close with a few comments about what can we do next in terms of technology. Here is what we call histoimage, or a direct back projection of events. This is a simulation of a cardiac phantom. Essentially, it's a circle with a lesion, an area with no activity. This histoimage at a scanner of 500 picosecond is blurry. I move to 200 picosecond, it's much better. I go to 10 picosecond. All the information is placed much more clearly, even before the reconstruction. Okay, this is before the reconstruction. We can actually do it on patients. This is on the MCT with a 500 picosecond scanner. And here is the vision. Same thing, another patient, but you can see that without doing any reconstruction, I can get details about the brain and the heart and the other position of the tracer. So there is something there that it's we can improve. If we improve the resolution, we always get better information. Do we still need reconstruction? Actually, I think so. Even if we get to 200 picosecond, definitely. On the left is pure histoimage, on the right is reconstructed. Even if we go to 100, I think we'll still need it, but the consistency space-time is enforced by iterative reconstruction, so it's probably needed. And I want to close with 2 slides, Manuela. I'll just show this. In terms of time of flight, there is a nice challenge. Some of you probably are already online here, and the time picosecond time of flight bed challenge, and a large group of researchers working on this, and definitely investigating new scintillators, new materials with fast emission like metamaterials, new detector geometry, Cherenkov light. People at CERN are familiar for that for decades, and so on. Now, the conclusive remark are these. So we did a great job as a pet physicist in the past 10 years. I have to be humble and say that I think the next 10 years belong not to the physicists, but to the biologists and the physicians. They're going to use this to do, to bring their science forward. But there's still space for new technology and detectors, mathematics, and reconstruction for challenging application. Multidisciplinary teams research that it's absolutely necessary. And with this, I think I acknowledge a few people that provide me with slides and help, and I'm ready for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maurizio. That was a challenge in itself, going through all of your material in such a short time for the amount of information provided. There's already some questions in the chat, so I start going through those and also start to take some of the questions when they are live. So let me start. Sorry, I won't go in the right order for some of these. So I'll start from the last one. Any thoughts on using black box AI tools, machine learning, neural networks on medical device software, in particular from a medical device certification point of view, where you need to be sure, of course, that the software does exactly what you want? You're muted, Maurizio.
Maybe I didn't want to answer this difficult question, right? Yeah. So
any thoughts?
Yeah, it's very good question. Yes, there are thoughts. We are working, everybody's working and introducing also on commercial level some level of AI, because not because it's cool, it is very cool, but the fact is that there are areas where we can do better. I don't want to replace conventional good methods with AI methods that are not as good, but there are areas that we can introduce it, but the regulatory is complex, and because validate with FDA or other agencies a conventional reconstruction method, it's an established procedure. With AI, a little more complex, but we are acquiring experience, and other industries are acquiring experience, so it will be possible, yes.
Thank you. I'll maybe take a question live. I see one raised hand. I will ask you to unmute, introduce yourself to the audience, and ask your question.
Hello, this is Erik Heine.
Hey, Erik.
Hi, Maurizio. We have been working a lot on cadmium telluride detectors, and we have been discussing measuring the energies of the photons. If you do that, you could actually determine the Doppler effect and the movement of the atom where it comes from. Do you see applications in PET in the future? Of course, long range future.
Well, the thing that I may I can think of immediately is positron range, right? And I think possibly this can help us to determine an accurate position and correct for the range, maybe. But yeah, I haven't worked on that, Erik. So, but absolutely would be interesting. Maybe you can pass me some information after this meeting. We can talk about offline.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question, Manuela? Paul Lecoq.
Paul, I was going to come to your question. Allow me to.
Okay, I'm sorry.
to ask another one. Yes.
Okay, fine. So
yeah, as Maurizio said, there's a host of names that are very well known both at CERN and in the general PET community. So thanks everyone for joining. First of all, another question: any development towards better energy resolution to reduce prompt gamma interferences from isotopes with complex decay schemes? Why are today the energy windows so different among different models and suppliers?
Mm-hmm. Well, they are different because a couple of reasons. First of all, not all detectors are the same. Some of them have better energy resolution, so then you can narrow the energy window, and others are worse, so you have to keep it open because you don't want to reduce the sensitivity. Yes, we have been going towards, over the years, towards a smaller and smaller energy window, exactly for that reason. We have to be careful because you also throw away good events. So, and the sensitivity is very important. Since we have good correction for scatter and prompt gammas, sometimes people prefer to be conservative and keep the wrong data if you can correct them instead of throwing them away. But I agree, we should, and maybe we should enable special modes for prompt gamma emitter in which we narrow the window only in that circumstances.
Thank you, Maurizio. Paul, you had a question about the Quadra experience.
Yeah, thank you, Manuela, and hello, Maurizio. It's nice to see you even remotely. Yeah, my question is on your experience with the Quadra. In fact, on two aspects. So the Quadra, as compared to the Vision, is 4 times longer, and in actual direction. But of course, you increase the sensitivity by doing that, the geometrical sensitivity, but also you increase the number of scatters, and you increase the number of random. So what is the first question is, what is the effective sensitivity gain going from the biograph, from the Vision, sorry, to the Quadra? And second, now when you have the Quadra, when you switch on or switch off the time, the TOF resolution, let's say when you switch on the time resolution with 200 picosecond resolution, you have another sensitivity, effective sensitivity gain. And my question is the overall sensitivity gain just the product of the gain in an axial field of view increase times the time of flight effective sensitivity gain? Or are there some other limiting factors?
Yeah, I'm going actually to this slide that actually holds the answer to your question. So it really depends on how you measure the sensitivity, because there is a NEMA sensitivity, 70 centimeter line. There is a point source sensitivity, and there are other sensitivity. So for NEMA sensitivity, which is a standard, you can see that I think the factor is about a factor 10, and if you use a closed angle, and much higher if you use a larger angle. And what is the difference between acceptance angle? Well, in the beginning, we actually thought that would have a degradation of spatial resolution if you open the angle to all linear responses, right? Because the oblique linear response would degrade it. In fact, the degradation is actually a fraction of a millimeter. We found out that it's not that bad. So in fact, at this point, I would not even recommend people to use the high sensitivity or the HS, but go directly to the full accepted angle and get the full resolution, the full gain in sensitivity. Yes, we do. I do think that we need to multiply by the gain, and in this plot you can see is multiplied by time of flight gain, because it is completely equivalent to increasing the counts. We demonstrated, not only I, but a lot of people did it. Your question was about scatter randoms. Yes, you introduce a lot of scatter randoms. and we introduce a big load on the data transfer. Okay, but we have a very good random correction that works very well, and that was not a problem. And we improved the scatter correction to handle the oblique scatter, which is a very complex. So we are happy about that. And we develop a data transfer and the electronic and hardware that is able to handle the data. So I guess we overcame those, and we made it, so it works.
So thank you, Maurizio. Then it makes sense to continue the challenge for 10 picoseconds. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you. A couple of questions that came during the talk. I think if you go back to slides 23, time of flight path and the low counts challenge, just for confirmation, these and the previous one, the simulation was done with GEANT, I guess, with GEANT4.
Yes, GEANT4. Yes. Let me see if I can find it. I say after this, I don't have the number. I cannot see the numbers here.
Yeah, you're right. A bit earlier.
Is it earlier or later?
Earlier.
Earlier. Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
what was the question?
It was whether you use what did you use for simulation?
Yeah, GEANT4.
Yeah. GEANT4. And if the time resolution, you know, the plot where you show the mean value over 10 realizations for different time of flight resolutions, the next one.
Yeah.
Yes. This is full width at half maximum.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That was it.
Yeah. Full width at maximum 600 picosecond. Yeah. 600 picosecond, 400, 200.
Another question, is it already possible to directly measure the partial pressure of oxygen using the PET technique?
This is a difficult question. I can't answer. I'm sorry. I try to keep up to speed to all the applications, but I can't. So, but I can get this information. If the person that asked this question can once email me, I'll get an answer.
Very good. Thanks
I could try to make it up, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Michael, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Maurizio, for a really nice and broad talk. I had a question about dose. So I believe that the regular old-fashioned PETs, you know, gave the patient quite a dose, but those are people who were suffering potentially from cancer or so. So that had a certain the benefit to risk ratio was okay. But with these new technologies, time of flight, all that stuff, are we getting to dose levels anywhere near what you might use for screening patients who are otherwise healthy?
Absolutely. That's we already have with the vision. We already start working, for example, with Dr. John Pryor. I don't know if he's online on a project of PET-CT screening for lung cancer patients and other groups. It is something that at this point we can probably reduce the dose to less than a millisievert, going from, I don't know what was for the old CT was probably like 20 millisieverts. So we're going down to a level that PET-CT screening, obviously of patients at risk, right? I don't think we are there in screening healthy patients, but patients, for example, they have been smokers for decades and they are healthy, but they are high risk of lung cancer or some risk of lung cancer. I think would probably be beneficial using very high sensitivity time of flight scanner to catch the tumor early, because that's the key to the survival.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Maurizio. I see there's one raised hand and a couple more written questions, and then I think we'll set you free. So I'll invite the next question to, oops, unmute yourself if I manage. Sorry.
Hello, sir. I have a question that please can you elaborate future of AI with these technologies? if you can please put some light on it.
Well, let's say, what can I say? In addition to what I would start from, I see, let me get to my slide, and here. I see a big, if I divide these classes of AI and PET, I see being a PET physicist close to the hardware, I really like this, the future of AI in detector and systems. There is, it is not explored yet completely, and there is a lot of improvement we can get from AI. There are simple problems if you want. I'm not trying to reconstruct distribution for a patient, but I reconstruct a very reproducible phenomenon of interaction of 511 kV on a crystal of scintillator. So the performance of deep learning could be excellent and could bring some benefits. So this is definitely a very important field that I would recommend people to work. And the other part that I think it's key is the corrections in reconstruction, improving the correction through AI. I think in particular attenuation correction is probably motion correction. It's very beneficial because we are going to solve through AI problems that cannot be solved properly with conventional method. And this is the key. Use AI to solve problems that are not solved otherwise. There is no point in trying to re-solve a problem you already solved. So correction is definitely something that needs help.
Thanks, Maurizio. Question, what about, there's a few questions that will concern the future, so I think is a nice way of ending the Q&A session. What about improvements to measure the photon direction? This is obviously very challenging. There were some interesting developments several years ago, but somehow they were not pursued.
Yes, yeah, it is interesting, and there are also other things, you know, more exotic things like life of positronium that has been presented at a few conferences, and we're doing some work on that. There are more, so the PET physicists have been working on a very simplified physics for decades. It's maybe about time that we go back to our physics books and we try to understand it better, and measuring the angle and using the measuring the life of positronium to that apparently depends on the environment. You know, environment with different density material, different material have a different life of positronium. All these things are things that are completely new. We disregarded for decades, and it's definitely very interesting. Yes.
I think what you said also connects to the other question was about the beta plus and third gamma PET as an option for the future.
Yeah, there is, you know, and that's where we expect, you know, that my group of physics group is about 20 people, and there is a limited amount of things we can do, but the academic and research world is full of bright, experienced physicists, and these are the fields in which we really you can push up the field, well, where we cannot because of lack of time and lack of resources. And
Very
then
inspiring.
teach us how to do it, and so we can make it, you know, real in the hospital.
Speaking of real in the hospital, you're reading the minds of our audience, because the last questions we're taking is from an Italian medical student, and she would like to know, in your opinion, how much time will we need to see these new technologies that you've shown as ideas for the future in clinical practice? The $1 million question.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there is a lot of, well, the actual technology in terms of hardware, right? It's already there. And I think I expect a lot by the, for example, the Quadra sites or the Explorer sites. This hospital, they are doing research using very high sensitivity scanners. They will teach us how to use it. and they may be opening the new avenues for clinical practice, not only for research. So yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, but I expect something coming up in the coming years.
Very well. I think with this, we nicely wrapped up your talk. Thanks again, Maurizio, for joining us and for such an interesting overview. It's been a pleasure. As we say, we're waiting for you at CERN as soon as the time will allow. And thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks Michael for co-hosting and organizing with us this seminar. And it's been really a pleasure to see a lot of familiar names, if not faces, in the audience. And I look forward to meet you again soon, hopefully, when the conference is on